I'm Lola.
And I'm Mamuna. Together, we have a combined 35 years of experience within the tech scene in North America and Europe.
We talk about the highs, the lows, the WTFs of navigating the technology industry and answer your questions about navigating tech careers.
This is Lost in Tech. Hello.
So Mamuna, it's like we have seasons. This would technically be season 3.
3. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to season 3.
Welcome to season 3. We had a break. Life stuff happened. We evolved as humans.
Yes.
And now we're back. We're recording. We got things to say. We're like in it again.
Thoughts to give. Let's do it.
Okay. Let's go with an easy topic to start with.
Let's
AI
do it.
regulation.
My brain is ready. Oh,
your brain is ready.
All right.
Tell me what you're hearing about this AI regulation, because we're all AI to the hilt right now.
All right. So you probably know more internationally. I know the U.S. stuff right now, and that's like Senate Bill 1047, I think, coming out of California. And there is conversations as to whether California is ahead of itself and whether it needs to give time and space for technology or everyone else to keep up.
Trying to be the progressive conscience of the US to a certain extent.
But what happens is oftentimes, I think it did this with GDPR as well, right? They oftentimes push, no, that might be Europe. I can't remember, but
Europe has GDPR. I think the California has the CCA, the California Customers Act or something like that. Yeah,
something about disclosing information, but they oftentimes push things in a certain direction, and people feel like they have to quickly follow up, and that causes discomfort.
Well, I think it's interesting in the US because California can decide to do this, but it's almost impossible to police across the country, right? It's like, and this is why the rest of the country follows suit, because like working in tech, I can't implement a California only data policy because I can't detect California IPs, or if I could, it'd be too ludicrously expensive. So I might as well apply that concept to the entire country, and then I can do like a national IP management strategy.
Totally. When I worked in the automotive industry as a lobbyist, one of the things I worked on was green chemistry, and California led the charge in that. And so what we were finding was our automotive members were very upset because they had to think about how do they build for California versus the rest of the country. And then certain states started to adopt the regulation. And so it was like 8 states, 12 states. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to build for California, and then like it just works everywhere else. Yeah. Exactly.
Same strategy as lowest common denominator.
Exactly.
I find this interesting because similar to data, so GDPR, the general data something from privacy something regulation from the European Union came first, and then California's own Data Act came second and applied that. The EU already launched AI regulation in 2023. And it's been interesting because they got a lot of crap for it beforehand, because everyone was like, this is not the place where people go to innovate anyway. And now you guys are going to regulate the next big innovation before anyone's ever even building anything meaningful in the region. It's like, way to tell the rest of the world we do not want to attract funding and like talent. But when they actually launched the regulation, folks were like, it's not that bad. It kind of provides a little bit of room, but it talks about giving guidance. It essentially charges companies with trying to think about intent, right? It's like, what is the purpose of the thing that you're building? And therefore, if it fits this category, then you should be considering these things, and therefore you will be tested on these things. But there's like a really good criticism, which we'll share in the show notes, which pokes at it, because as with any regulation, there are some assumptions here about how companies start up. And I think the EU regulation exposes itself by having some naivety about how startups get started, right? Like a lot of startups don't even think about intent. And we know this because we see the implications of that. But it's also not like government policy where you spend like 2 years planning before you start building. That is not where we are in the tech world.
Hop in.
You just hop in. So then there's this gap of like, well, if I didn't know that was my intent because I started building and then had to pivot 3 times, am I being held accountable because you can't prove that I knew that at the beginning and so forth? And then there were a bunch of scenarios, and I actually can't find the Twitter thread, where one of the architects of the regulation was challenged on Twitter on one point, on X. I was challenged on X at one point and actually shared a tweet that was like, oh, we didn't think about that. And then the whole world came on top of them. And it was like, well, so if you didn't think about it and you do think the point is valid, but now you've launched the regulation and you plan on updating the regulation, like how well thought out was this whole thing?
Though, right? It doesn't matter how well thought out it is. Like, you're never going to be able to keep it up to date enough to
protect people.
Yeah. I mean, the technology is so new. It's moving so fast.
I mean, I think I'm on the fence about whether or not regulation is going to work in the way that we think about it right now.
Now or in the future?
I think both. And I'm on the fence for 2 reasons. Mm-hmm. I think in general, the concept of harm has been ignored in almost all the regulations that I've seen to date. So like, even in the US, the argument that seems to be driving a lot of the discussion around regulation is labor laws, not bias, for example. No. And we already know that a lot of use of AI and big data and all that stuff is driving and perpetuating bias. So the claims around harm are actually economic. It's like, how do we protect tax revenue? How do we protect income? The secondary point might be about the harm against people. But even to that, I don't trust, and this is kind of like a tangential point about like who's writing the regulation.
We talked about this in the past around social media. We talked about this.
Right? Yeah, it's like in the context of social media, in the context of AI, for me, in the context of crypto. If you don't understand the thing you're regulating, you're just going to do some dumb shit. You're going to put dumb shit in the regulation. And I think as a person on the outside, I would feel much more confident about any regulation if I felt they were going from like a people first approach. They're not often. So that's the socialist in me. And then secondly, that actually people who understood the tech were writing the regulation, and they don't. They understand regulations, and that's how they're writing the regulation, but they don't understand the technology. Therefore, the naivety is visible and blind, and therefore it just ignores it.
Like 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's like, no. It could equal 5.
I know. I'll give you one really good example. I know I keep bringing it back to blockchain. People, I cannot help myself. The pull is too high. But an example so I'm trying to build applications on blockchain that are like have real world value. And one of the examples of things that we keep coming across when it comes to like crypto and real money is this regulations against like money laundering and anti-terrorism and all of these things, right? So you have to do this thing called a know your customer check, where you have to verify that an individual is who they say they are, live where they say they are, has ID that's verifiable, and they're not somebody that's on like a sanctions list or like a terrorism list. In order to meet that standard, most KYC providers cannot meet the government regulation test without collecting that information in plain format. So you have to have my actual passport. You have to take a picture of my actual ID. You've got to take a picture of my actual face. But if the comparison against like privacy laws was actually going to be taken into account, and you can give me a technology that would verify facts about me, but never require you to store my data, you should grab that with both hands, like on day one, and be like, okay, we're ready. We're going to do this. Instead, there is so much resistance there's a particular tech called zero knowledge proof, right? I can confirm your age, but I do not need to take a photocopy, a picture, or even see your driving license. And the fact that almost every regulator globally is rejecting this, it's like they're throwing away the baby in the bathwater. It's on a blockchain. We don't do blockchain. Crypto's terrible for people. It's like, but then you're going to hammer me on a privacy regulation. Yeah. But in order to meet the privacy regulation around know your customer checks, I have to collect information. And in some cases, like keep it for a really long time. So it's at risk because then I have to store the information. I can't just see it and say I saw it and ditch it. I have to keep it. And I'm just like, this is why I don't trust the regulator. So it's not about the intent. It's about practical execution. Means that you're not actually, they're not technology minded. They're not adopting, they're not looking at the tech as an opportunity space. They're looking at it as an exploitation and protectionism space. And then like anything that comes out of that, it's just going to be worse for everybody, worse for innovators and worse for people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you think about, you know, for the government to want to create regulations around AI, what their benefit is, right? So what are they trying to prevent versus if they were to say, okay, hey, companies, we need you all to come together and help us put together. So like, they're not going to do that because they're going to be afraid probably the companies are going to create something that's going to be to their benefit. But I do think that like if the government were to be, or even the state of California were to be realistic about the technology, they'd pull people in the room who were actually touching it and have the knowledge to help them craft it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the test will be, in the EU is slightly different to like California, but like in the EU, when regulations are devised, it's professional regulators who are in the room. It's less political. It's less, I mean, it's political, but it's not as politicized as it might be in like the US federal system. I don't put a lot of stock on having the right people in the room because I think, again, the right people might be in the room and the outcome that they believe is most technically viable is rejected because the optics don't look right. And I think...
Well, I think that's what I'm saying, right? Because that like that statement alone, the optics don't look right. I think it's like the optics according to who or to what. Like what is
whatever
the
political energy is. And those politicians are the least knowledgeable. So this is what I mean. It's like the intent of the regulation is to protect the people and protect labor and protect jobs. And it's to do no harm and to keep these terrible technologists accountable, of which, let us agree, there are terrible technologists. We are not defending our industry at all because ethics is not top of mind for these folks.
No.
My challenge is... to me, it's like two opposites of the spectrum. Do I trust the technologists who are clearly unethical in the way that they approach things? No.
Well,
do I trust the regulators and the government when they tell me that they're trying to protect me? No. So I'm just here in the middle. I'm like, I don't know what the right answer is. But what I don't think the right answer is, I don't buy the general statements around what they are trying to achieve that come from either the EU or California or any other regulator right now when it comes to AI. I don't trust them.
It'd be interesting to get both in a room and see what the middle look like what types of concessions.
They should just hire us, Mamuna. They should just hire us. We'll fix this.
We'll fix it?
Yeah, we'll fix
it for the world.
Yeah. I'm not naive, but I want nice things. So let's figure out a middle ground for making money and doing good.
Yes. Hey, I like it.
I like it.
Someone has to be our what's it called? Like our whistleblower in the event we veer off track.
I know somebody
checks and balances.
Checks and balances for whatnot. Yeah, we'll see. Moving on to another topic though, that's another big one that's been going around. Job hunting in tech right now. Yeah,
heart goes out. I think this one is a challenging one because we see on one side companies balancing out a bit, maybe even in some cases starting to open up more roles or show more interest in roles.
Hiring energy again in tech. There definitely is.
But we also still see layoffs happening. And as part of those layoffs, we see still people who've been in the job market for months, if not like a year or so, looking for an opportunity. So it's definitely not quite balanced at the moment. And I think people are feeling different things. Like companies are feeling like they have great pick, right? Because a lot of people are looking. And the people who are looking are like, I'm putting in a ton of applications and I'm not hearing anything back. Or some people are hearing things very quickly and getting picked up very quickly. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think just to link it back to AI, we're all at risk of being out of a job.
Yes.
I put some info about a product we were working on into ChatGPT last week, and it did a better job on writing the product summary than I probably would have done. And I was like,
have you used Claude yet?
Huh?
Have you used Claude yet?
No, I haven't. Please don't tell me this is a dedicated PM one, because then we're
No,
totally
no, no,
done.
no. It's Anthropic's like ChatGPT version.
Oh, okay. I'll have to try it. I'm trying to embrace the tech a little bit more, as we've discussed many times on here.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a shift in job profile, and people doing jobs that can very easily be displaced by, training an AI model. They're just not going to get the type of job they used to do again. It's just not going to exist. Right. But I also see hiring energy, because I can literally price it by like the frequency of things in my inbox on LinkedIn. Like
LinkedIn
it seems like it's picked up again. Yeah, like suddenly I'm getting these outsized pings again. And I do think I'm part of a few like Slack communities, and one of them kind of links back to my design background. And one of those communities has been talking a lot about something interesting happening to people like at the senior end. So when you hear about companies where like, oh yeah, they sacked all the director level people and, they kind of flattened the organization, it's people kind of our age and maybe a little bit older who are being put out of work. And there are two sides of this that I'm kind of seeing. One, I feel anecdotally in my circles and industry, I see older women getting the really, really shit end of this. And I seem to be seeing like, a few women who are like, do you know what? I'm just going to take a sabbatical because this is soul destroying right now. So I'd rather be intentionally out of work than trying to find work and struggling. Or a couple have retired. And I'm like, how old are you? Did you make that much money? Like, what the hell's going on? Or one person shared a really vivid story of how she tried to like domain shift and went for this role. And they were looking at her CV and they were like, well, you're clearly overqualified. There's no way you would want this. There's no point us interviewing you. It's like, but I applied and I'm here and I'm trying to explain something to you, but you can't see past. She was kind of like, you have to she was working in a European country where like you have to put your date of birth on your applications. Again, EU, come on, like the shit could just change. And she was like, they can't help it. They just can't get past how old you must be and what you must be thinking, and how the interviewer might be projecting into, well, when I'm your age, I would want this and you mustn't want this now. And I can see the effects of this kind of like long-term job hunt. If my anecdotal experience is playing true, then a lot of older workers are going to find themselves out of work for a really long time in a really difficult place. And I don't agree that they've all made a ton of money and can just retire, but potentially it makes sense to say you're retired from one industry and just completely career shift and ditch your past experience in order to go get a job, full stop, because it's not worth using your experience anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting, right? Because when people hear DEI, they think oftentimes it has to do with race, but a lot of times it has to do with like the actual mix.
Yeah.
That also includes age. Of your working group. And so sometimes you'll see people are like, oh, I just want to hire a young person because they have no family ties. They can work long hours. They can do all these things. And I don't want to hire women or people who identify as women because they are going to have to think about childcare and this and that, or, like the things that maybe the biases folks may place inadvertently on like the profile of person they are looking for may not be stated, but it may just be kind of floating around depending on who's the hiring manager is. And if we're seeing most of the hiring managers being a certain type of person, then they're going to see a lot of people looking for similar types of people. And that's naturally going to push out large swaths of the market. And so, I don't know, it's like, how do you actually solve for that?
I find it's a really tricky problem because, once again, and call me Lola fence sitter maximum, like I see the other side as well, right? And I see the other side. Well, actually, first of all, just to the point you made, I do think there's active prejudice right now hiring against people with seniority and experience in the market anecdotally, because people I know who've been out of work. Exactly. They are worth a certain amount of money, and companies know that either they're going to have a really hard time negotiating, or they can just get some of that cheaper. And so they don't need to pay for that experience. That's a horrible situation to be in, but I think I see that going on. On the flip side, I work for a young company. We would be considered a startup, but we're fairly big, 100 and I don't know, something odd. And I have observed in my job, people who've come in with seniority, with experience and great track record struggle to reconcile that with the fact that it's a startup. So you're not being asked to manage managers who manage executors. You are being asked to apply the judgment of your experience, and you may be managing people, but every single person in the company right now is in IC mode. And that is required from you every single day you're here. Now, for me personally, that's why I'm here, right? Like I hated the whole career ladder politics shit. I wasn't interested in just laddering up. But I can see the challenge if you spent a long time away. It's a big shift.
Yeah.
The tools are different. The dynamics are different. Yeah.
And if that's not how to do it,
right,
you're doing it.
And I do think leadership itself is a skill. So this idea of like managers don't do anything is BS, because we know management is hard. People management is hard.
If you're a good manager, it's hard.
If you're a good manager, it's hard. If you're a bad manager, because you don't have the skills, it's terrifying, right, to manage people, because nobody's actually trained you on humans are going to human, and you have to lean all the way in, even though it's supposed to be work. So I don't want to underestimate the value of people leadership and the experience of managing managers in a scaled organization. But I do understand that in this climate, I see the anecdotal evidence of people looking for work and struggling. And then I also see the evidence inside a company that has hired very senior people, and they've struggled to like mindset shift. They've struggled to kind of go back to like, okay, I used to do this in this other job, but here I need to do something different. And so there's probably a little bit of both that's going on right now. But I mean, I guess I do think there's a positive trend in the market right now in that tech jobs are opening up again. And I do think people who've been out of work may see more opportunities, more pings. I don't quite know if there's like a generalizable trend of why it's taking so long to be hired if you do have the right skills. But I do think there's probably a little bit of bias, ageism, try and get someone on the cheap. And then people probably needing to pivot how they think about the kind of work they need to be doing, like whatever their life stage, and kind of lean into the job market as it is right now, not as they would like it to be, because that's where they're comfortable. And somewhere between that, I do hope some of the people who've been out of work for a really long time can find an opportunity that fits.
I mean, it feels like a number of startups are getting more funds. And so you start to see more of those like earlier stage startups looking for people. And so like the thing that I think of when I think about like creative opportunities for people that I've spoken to, I'm like, okay, hey, for a senior person who hasn't been working for a little while, like, is it worth you lending your brain as like an advisor? Yeah. Right. And so it's like, okay, just kind of help people, guide them. And then, person's like, hey, this was great. I have a friend that is working on something. Would you be interested in talking to them? And so we're like really networking your way around on the advisory side. And for people who potentially are more junior, I think networking is important, right? Because you're no longer having to do that. Oh, I threw my resume into a black hole. I'm hoping that someone responds. It's like, hey, recruiter, hey, director of product, whatever, do you have 15 minutes to get to know me? I'd love to tell you more about myself. And that's even a crapshoot, sort of, because like I probably half of my inbox is people wanting to take 15 minutes. And I'm like, okay, if I did that for everybody, that would be a full-time job in itself.
Yeah, same.
Same. So it's like finding a balance in that. Like I wouldn't say go do that at you have to be strategic in who you're reaching out to and seeing like if there's a good fit for your skills and expertise, and really having something that maybe stands out, or, going to an event where someone's speaking. I did that recently where I had like I don't even know, a line of people after I spoke at an event, and they're like, hey, 15 minutes. Hey. And I was like, okay, like, I'm here. I might as well. So maybe you might catch people strategically in real life.
I mean, I think I would double click on that. And for people who are even in work right now, never stop investing in that network, because it's easier to get the attention of somebody that you've already met, already had a conversation with, already established a relationship with when it comes to talking about your next opportunity. So like even nurturing a circle of like people who you say hi to, check in with, have built a relationship with, because you never know when you're going to need to tap into that resource. It makes it so much easier for somebody to respond than a cold outreach. The other thing I would add to that, though, is like, I do think if there is a behavioral profile that suits tech in 2024, it's a builder mindset. And I don't mean a builder mindset as like a coder. I'm not a coder. I mean a builder mindset in that you need new skills and you're willing to say, okay, I'm going to ABC myself. I'm going to go teach myself how to do this thing that I do not understand. I am going to avoid the naive critique that everybody else is doing, and I'm going to educate myself on what do I personally believe about this tech, this context, this opportunity. I know a couple of people who have been made redundant, lost their jobs in the last year, are spending time and they're literally retraining themselves, not necessarily formal qualifications, but like learning to write in new programming languages, doing workshops and going to conferences on topics that they have not had in their career before. Like they're removing all the assumptions about their experience, and they're saying, well, if the job market is shifting, then the thing I'm going to go do is go be someone in that new shift.
Right.
And some of them are starting companies. Not that these companies are going to be like, the next big a unicorn, but some of them might be. Like I know a number of people who are successful entrepreneurs who became that way because they were made redundant. And certainly the best way to pitch yourself to a company in a new domain, or that's looking for a skill in a role that maybe you think you've done before, but is operating in a slightly different way, is to say, hey, look what I did when I was off. Look what I learned. Look at how I gained and maintained traction. And I think there's never, if ever there was a time when you can't rest on your laurels about what you used to do, it's now. It's now. And then like that's the new default state, is you're always building new skills or building new things. And whether you're going to be an employee or a founder, it's always going to be tested that you're in that builder mindset when it comes to tech, without question.
I think that's a great call out, because people are always going to ask, especially if it's been a bit of time, what have you been doing during this period? And it would suck to just say, I've just been applying to jobs, even though that's a lot. I'm not going to like downplay that, but you definitely want to make sure that you are continuing to invest in you, because that is like your biggest opportunity commodity, for you to be able to keep pitching and selling yourself forward. I would say, because we never do this, I would ask that people share either in the comments, YouTube comments, or email us. What's our email?
help@lostintech.com.
There we go.
lostintechpodcast.com.
Yes, there we go. Email us what you are doing while you are unemployed or job searching to keep yourself engaged, keep yourself learning. I think you could be inspiring for others who are looking to get started on this journey. I think it's good for people to know there's community. So I'd love to kind of hear what you all are working on, so we can cheer you on.
We've made this show for you, and we want to hear your stories. We have our combined 35 years experience in tech. We have an incredible bank of experts to call on. We are your safe space. So send us your tech challenges and we'll help you create some draft decisions through some real talk.
You've been listening to me, Mamuna Oladipo.
And me, Oyelayo-Pearson.
Edited and produced by me, Michael Blissa, with theme music by 031 Mash.
Email us at help@lostintechpodcast.com or DM us at lostintechpod.